Rosalind Harris is a waitress who works two jobs just trying to make ends meet so that she can pay her college tuition fees. During one of the busiest weekends of the year, she was working her shift at the Washington restaurant, Busboys and Poets, when a group of Texan men walked in with their conspicuous red hats, sticking out like a sore thumb in that particular establishment with its very laid-back, artistic vibe that is known for being a meeting place for civil rights activists, artists, and poets. Rosalind's first thought was they might be looking for trouble, particularly as it was an emotionally charged weekend for the whole country. At first, the 25-year-old waitress was instinctively nervous about serving them and hoped they weren't there to make any trouble for her or for the other customers. She would find out soon enough if her instincts were true gut feelings or based on ideas that she intuitively based on their image. This wasn't the first time that Rosalind had encountered trouble in her restaurant, but these men were on another level of intimidating and spooky. But she still wasn't expecting what she found on the table. She couldn't believe her eyes. She works hard, and the last thing she wanted was for any customer drama to occur. Not only would she be risking her customers' safety within her joint, but her very livelihood itself. If she did not deal with these strange men that she was serving before they started something, she could take the blame. The 25-year-old is a professional dancer, and her work as a waitress is a means to an end, a way to put herself through college. The weekend that this unexpected incident took place is significant to the story. It was the weekend of two majorly important marches in Washington that weekend. The inauguration of the 45th President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, and the Women's March. If you know anything about politics, then you may have guessed that these two movements did not see eye to eye. The Women's March members were scathingly critical of Trump, who is infamous for his sexist remarks. She was also not the biggest Trump fan. You see, Rosalind is an outspoken and passionate feminist, among many other things. So, when these men walked in wearing those infamous red MAGA hats, she instantly took against them. They were mortal enemies, after all, and they were on her turf. Funnily enough, both parties in our story were at a march that weekend, but while those in the red hats were at the inauguration, Rosalind was at the Women's March. Rosalind was one of the 500,000 who turned up to march in the rally to stick up for her beliefs. One such visitor was Jason White from Texas and his friends. There were many people in the capital city at that time from all walks of life with many different political beliefs. While everyone was largely coexisting with only a few violent moments, things were tense. Once the busy weekend was over, many visitors stayed in the capital city for the following week. It was a fateful lunchtime for both parties that day, as they would both learn a lot. Including Rosalind, it was like something from a movie where the happy-go-lucky protagonist and his friends walk into a biker gang bar and all the thugs silently stare at them. Only this time, the Trump supporters had walked into a liberal den. When Jason and his friends walked into Busboys and Poets, the place went silent, looking at the group in disbelief. Rosalind immediately made two quick assumptions about the small group. She may have been reaching, but there were so many glaringly obvious signs. Namely, that a group of Trump supporters had no idea what Rosalind's left-wing cafe was, given that they had casually strolled in. These gentlemen were clearly out of their depths. Firstly, that they had come from out of town, and secondly, that they were in Washington to celebrate the inauguration of the new president. When people see Trump supporters, they often assume that they are bigoted, aggressive, or worse, members of a far-right group. Although Rosalind may have been right on both accounts, there was a lesson for them all about not judging a book by its cover. The problem with modern politics is that people will assume a whole shopping list's worth of qualities in you once they discover what your political affiliation is. In that respect, it shouldn't come as a surprise that the group was casually walking around in their red Make America Great Again caps, especially as Jason is not ashamed of his proud patriotism. He believed that it was only right that an American should support their president. The 37-year-old is a big family man with a close-knit network of friends and a dentist back in his hometown in Texas. To be honest, the red caps caught everyone's eye first, as they just seemed so out of place in such an establishment. Rosalind didn't say anything to them about the caps, but Jason quietly suggested to the others that they take them off while they were having lunch in the restaurant. As you can imagine, it didn't take him long to realize that his kind was not particularly welcome in an establishment like this one. Jason said that when they went inside to sit down, they started getting looks. "I told my friend, you need to take your hat off. I don't want people to think we're coming in here to flaunt. We're just coming here to have lunch." Jason was astute enough to realize that this was a safe space, where the only political stances that were welcomed or discussed were on the left side of the overall political spectrum. Incredibly, if Rosalind was disturbed by the men's appearance, she did not show it. Rosalind was still buzzing from the high energy she got from the powerful women's march and was especially cheery as she walked over to Jason's table to give them service, handing them the menus with a big smile, which they warmly reciprocated. She was in an incredible mood and nothing could shake her. The men were relieved to see her friendliness, to say the least. Soon enough, they were making jokes together. Then he asked Rosalind what was her favorite thing on the menu, and when she said the avocado panini was delicious, he ordered that as he loves avocado too, saying that it was a relief for both of us to just laugh together. Jason said that she had laughed when they said they were from West Texas, saying that she evidently could tell they were from the South. After they broke the ice a little, Jason wondered about the restaurant bookstore's history and asked Rosalind about it. She was not about to turn hostile. She was only too happy to answer their questions, being sure they had never experienced a place quite like it. While many people will feel that those with an opposing political stance should simply be fought, Rosalind was of the mind that warmth and open conversations are the best way forwards. Hughes produced an extensive collection of news articles, poems, novels, and even plays in his time, and was the pioneer of the jazz poetry form. He was a cultural, social, and political icon who today holds a legendary status. Rosalind told the three men that busboys and poets were named after poet Langston Hughes, a key figure in African American literature, as he used to be a busboy in the 1920s before he gained recognition for his work. After all, it was an unusual encounter for both parties involved. There was perhaps far more to their encounter than just pleasantries and an enjoyable square meal for the MAGA men. Rosalind had a strange feeling as she carried on with her work after introducing the men to the place. After taking their orders, Rosalind let the group enjoy their lunch, thinking that would probably be the end of the encounter, but was it? Nothing could have prepared her for what was to come. Rosalind would have liked to have seen the guys off properly and thanked them for their patronage. Of course, Rosalind now went over to the table to clean up for the next customers and collect any tip they may have left. An hour or so later, Jason and his friends finished their lunch and left the restaurant after saying thank you and goodbye from afar. What could they possibly have had to say to Rosalind? At first, she thought it was just a careless scribble, until she looked a little closer and it became clear that one of the friends had written a note. As friendly as their interaction had been, it was just a waitress serving customers at the end of the day. When Rosalind arrived at the table to clean up and pick up the check, she noticed it was covered in words. Rosalind's curiosity began to burn as she skimmed over the note. She looked around to see if the men had stuck around, but they were well on their way by that point. Rosalind picked up the note and started to read. With each sentence, Rosalind felt more and more moved by the heartfelt message. The note went on to say, if everyone would share a smile and kindness like your beautiful smile, our country will come together as one people, Jason wrote. She could never have expected that people so different from her would appreciate her basic courtesies and pleasantries so gratefully. Not race, not gender, just American. God bless. Rosalind was at a loss for words. Rosalind was truly touched by Jason's note. Some good, some bad, but very rarely will they experience a life-changing moment like this one. But there was so much more to come for Rosalind, whose experience had just begun. There was so much more amazingness to come. The idea of how far a smile can go really invigorated her positivity. Waitresses will generally have all manner of interactions with people. The total cost of the check for the three's lunch came in at $72.60. For a waitress, any tip above 20% is exciting, but 625% was just unbelievable. As everyone knows, waitresses often do not earn luxurious salaries in any country or state. They work incredibly hard for very little pay and often have to survive on tips alone. So Rosalind was utterly astounded when she saw they had left a tip of a whopping $450. This tip was so much more than money. It was a way forward for people of all walks of life and political beliefs to finally begin respecting and caring for one another. Of course, there was a lot of work to be done to reach that stage. Jason said that the $450 tip was a nod to the inauguration of the 45th President of the United States, Trump, as a symbolic gesture that he hoped everyone could move forward together. Jason hadn't even told his friends what he was doing. 2 walks of life with one goal. This was not some grand scheme that he and his pals had come up with Rather, it was a spontaneous gesture that Jason had thought up after meeting the warm waitress, that he felt so moved by everything that he had seen in Washington over the weekend. With both the election of the president and the powerful Women's March, suddenly Jason was thinking in new ways that he had never considered before. Jason remembers looking at all those influential figures on the walls of the Booze Boys and Poets establishment and thinking about how the inauguration and the Women's March coincided and being inspired as for him. For these were two examples of people expressing their American values. It seemed like there was so much for him to learn from the living and departed figures in this world. Influenced also by being a devout Christian, Jason felt these two events represented the very foundation of what it meant to be American. America had changed so much in just a few years, and Jason was doing his best to keep up. This included the smiling waitress who served him with a smile no matter what she might have thought about him at first, inspiring his incredible act of kindness. It is incredible how people can find so much in common with each other even when they appear so different. This thought inspired Jason, and he began thinking about how much he had in common with other people, even if on the first impression that may not be so obvious. To put it simply, don't judge a book by its cover or face value. Jason said in an interview that while he was sitting there, thinking about the whole weekend he had just experienced, he thought about how if most Americans have preconceived opinions of one another, then we're never the grown to get better. Jason said that he wanted to show Rosalind that they probably had more in common than first appearances may show. The man had left with much personal growth. Rosalind said how one often automatically makes assumptions that if someone supports Trump, that they have certain ideas, but she was pleasantly surprised that Jason was more embracing than even some of my more liberal friends. And there was a real authenticity in our exchange. She said, both the lovely heartfelt words and the hefty tip were such wonderful gestures that Rosalind felt extremely touched and emotional. So the $450 tip is a huge weight off my shoulder, she said. She had just taken on extra shifts because she had to move apartment and didn't know if she'd have enough cash to pay any upfront costs. This might not seem like much money to a person that earns well. Not only were the words extremely moving for Rosalind, there was also no denying that the generous tip came at a perfect time for her.